bring on Mojo, we want to introduce as much as possible different approaches, different curricula that we use for adult education. And today is just that. So you will see throughout 2026, we will introduce you to some different curricula through webinars. And today, as I said, we have Dr. Johan Halman with us from Malawi, from Germany, but in Malawi. And he originated the curriculum MangerALE. And so today he's going to tell us about that. And if you are working in or managing, especially managing some kind of adult education course, you may find this presentation very helpful for you. So without further ado, let me pass ahead to Johan. Johan, please go ahead and share your presentation with us.
Thank you very much, David, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. It's very nice to see so many faces, so many people in this virtual room. Some faces that I know. I'm particularly happy, of course, to also see many representatives from Malawi today, which is, of course, very encouraging, but generally throughout the continent. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure, I can say, to introduce the curriculum MangerALE to you today. I will now try to share, as we have practiced in the test session before this, to share my screen so that you can very well follow what I am going to say. Is my understanding correct that you can all see now the title of the presentation, the curriculum MangerALE? That's fantastic. So the curriculum MangerALE is the curriculum that I am going to talk about today. And it actually is part of, let me say, a greater collection of material that is at the disposal of DVV International, that has been developed by DVV International, not solely by DVV International, usually with partners, sometimes with more initiative from headquarters, sometimes with more initiative from certain regional or country offices, but which we regard as important tools that can be used in almost any context. Of course, they are rather general tools, as you will get to see during my presentation of the curriculum MangerALE as well. But our idea is actually that we have a toolbox with universal tools, with universal curricula that we can use throughout the countries where we are working in. Remember that in Africa, DVV International is working in about 10 countries at the moment, and globally there's about 30 different countries where we are working in. And these curricula that you see here have been implemented in quite a number of them and have also been translated into a number of different languages. Of course, by far the most, the curriculum globale, which a lot of you might know, which I think has been translated into more than 10 languages by now. The curriculum institutionale and the curriculum MangerALE, which has also been translated into a few languages so far. What's the difference between the different curricula? The curriculum globale, which is the most famous because it's also a tool which has the official approval of UNESCO, is a curriculum for adult educators, so for training adult educators. The curriculum institutionale is a curriculum which is about the development, about the capacity building for institutions that provide adult education. So adult education centers, even community learning centers, other centers where adults can learn. And then we have the curriculum MangerALE, which we are talking about today. And the curriculum MangerALE is a curriculum which addresses the training needs for managers of adult education institutions. So those who are not teaching themselves, but those who are managing the centers, organizing the classes, organizing whatever is offered. You can imagine that that requires, depending on the respective institution, a lot of different competences as well. Now, how did the curriculum actually originate? My background is that before coming to Malawi, I actually worked in Southeast Asia for 4 years. Between 2019 and 2023, I was the regional director for Southeast Asia for DVV International, based in Laos. And in Laos, we had done a complete training cycle of the curriculum globale at the time. That was even something that was done before I became regional director. Remember, the curriculum globale is a curriculum for adult educators, so those who train adults. And this cycle was done, and there was a lot of improvement on the side of training, on the side of teaching. But then we realized, okay, it's nice if we have a good group of adult educators, but we still need to organize this somehow. And then in cooperation with the Ministry for Education, and most importantly, the Department for Non-Formal Education, that was the department responsible for adult education, we actually said, no, we also need to strengthen management skills in the relevant institutions that provide adult education, because otherwise still the level of organization is not high enough to really benefit from the good efforts that had already been done in order to improve the skills of adult educators. So this is why we said we will basically looking at the example, looking at the model of the curriculum globale, also develop a curriculum for managers of adult education centers. So at first, we tried to define some content, what is important for those management training cycle trainings. And then we didn't really have much material. A lot what we did, we defined 6 modules in total. A lot what was done there actually depended simply on the expertise of the trainers. So if there was a session about finances, we looked for an expert in finances. If it was about monitoring and evaluation, we looked for experts in that particular field. So this is basically how we sort of built up on the run. We didn't have a curriculum at all when we started the training cycle, and we didn't really have one when we finished it in 2020. But based on a needs analysis, which we did in the beginning in Laos, and then on the competence of the respective trainers, we then sort of implemented module by module. The other country in Southeast Asia where we are working as DVV International, and where we were working also at the time, was Cambodia. And the 2 countries are very comparable with regard to their challenges, with regard to their needs. So we said, okay, we'll maybe not copy the program 100%, but we certainly see the need for better capacity building for the managers of adult education centers as well. So this is why we also started the process in Cambodia a bit later, but basically with a similar build-up with 6 modules, with a similar target group. Basically, we had 30 to 35 participants coming from the non-formal education sector, people working for government partners, but also a few partners, at least in Cambodia. In Laos, the civil society is not very much developed, but in Cambodia, we also had non-governmental partners, and they also joined in that training cycle. So that was the basis for the development. And then we said, well, okay, now we have our experience in Southeast Asia, and this is something that other regions, other DVV international projects, other actors in adult education could actually benefit from as well. And so we thought, okay, we already have the curriculum globale, which was developed more than 10 years ago, actually in cooperation mainly with some other German partners, also academic partners. Then we had the curriculum institutionale, which actually had its roots in the Middle East, in Jordan and Palestine. And now we should actually also have a curriculum which somehow has some universal, some global ambition to actually support capacity building for adult education managers worldwide in all our projects and hopefully even beyond. So we set ourselves the objectives that we will have a universal competency-based curriculum that can be used in all regions, just like the other curricula that we had so far developed as well. Now, how do we go about this? First of all, we looked at what was already on the table, mainly stemming from Southeast Asia, but we also consulted our other regions, our offices, some external partners as well to say, okay, this is how we've done it in Southeast Asia. Is that something that also meets your demands? Are there other topics that should be integrated? Do you agree with this structure? Should we change the structure a little bit? So that was the first kind of discussion we had until we finally came up with a structure that sort of paved the way for what the curriculum could actually look at. So that we had the universal structure where we said, okay, now we have a very basic structure, but now this needs to be filled with content. And for it to be filled with content, we looked for experts in curriculum development, but also with regard to this particular topic of management. And of course, we didn't want anyone who was just sitting in the ivory tower and writing up a curriculum, but we wanted to have a very participatory process where we as DVV International, myself, who was managing the process in Southeast Asia, but also the colleagues in other regions, where they could actually give feedback and get into dialogue with the experts that we then eventually chose. And we were quite fortunate that we could actually get some very competent experts on board, even from the Southeast Asian region at the time, from Vietnam, a country where we are not working at the moment, but which also has quite a tradition in adult education and in lifelong learning, and with which occasionally on a regional level we were also working together. So we had 3 experts, and 2 of them were actually from Vietnam, the one from the Center for Lifelong Learning of the Southeast Asian Education Ministers Organization, another representative from the partner ministry in Vietnam, and then we had a Belgian consultant who joined the team, who was also very experienced as far as the management component was concerned. So we really had both the educational, the curriculum development part, as well as the management part on board in order to be able to develop this very curriculum. Now, how did the experts and ourselves go about? As I said, the aim was a competency-based curriculum for training adult education managers worldwide. So we had to move away from only that Southeast Asian experience, which we already partly did through that participatory process in the very beginning, where we established a certain structure where we could already say, okay, we have 6 modules. These are the modules. This is the structure of the curriculum. Now we need to see what the different modules should be about. So we, of course, had a theoretical framework. We talk about a competency-based curriculum. So we looked at the concept of the OECD, which also defines competencies in a very much forward-looking way. Where they also look at, well, not only what is important now, but maybe which skills might be important in the future as well. Then we looked at classical adult education theory at andragogy. As a prime example, Malcolm Knowles, who was, let me say, between 1960 and 1980, maybe one of the leading experts in adult education, by really drawing also a line between education for adults and, for example, pedagogy, where he said that, of course, when you teach adults, you have to go about in a very different way. I think most aspects that you know as well, that there is a lot that adults bring to the table, that the group can benefit from. They need a different kind of address. They can contribute a lot themselves. It's very much about their motivation, their desire to know something which is responsible, which is relevant for their personal context, and so on and so forth. So that, of course, included also a lot of participatory principles, which are very much important in any kind of training for adults, and which should be widely integrated. Then, as I said, a very important starting point was also the pilot trainings that we did in Laos and Cambodia, where, of course, we gained a lot of insights on what went well and what didn't go well, where also the trainers of those trainings in Laos and Cambodia could actually be consulted, so that there was a lot of valuable insight. And then the consultants actually applied the so-called ADDIE model, where they first analyzed, once again, the need that could be found with regard to the topic. They then made a very broad design to see, well, of course, what are the areas that are important in the respective modules. They then developed them, and then there was a part of evaluation where we went back and said, is this what we want? Do we need changes? And we actually did this module by module. So whenever there was a module fully developed, or let me say drafted, then the experts went back to me, and I might have gone back to some other colleagues to look at how good, or let me say how adequate it already was. And we had a discussion on what could be improved module by module, until we then eventually got to a point where we thought, okay, yeah, this is it. I think the most important aspects have really been covered now. Now, there are some basic principles, I would say, for the curriculum that I would like to introduce here before we actually look into the curriculum. The relevance. The curriculum started from the reality of the training cycles, as I explained, and now we had to do some kind of transfer away, or a certain step away from what we did in Southeast Asia, back to a more universal, a more global level, so that it includes cases that could possibly apply not only in Southeast Asia, but in Africa, in Europe, in Latin America as well. We needed, of course, consistency. We needed a curriculum which is logical, cohesive, and consistent in itself, but also with the other curricula. So there is also a part which you find in the curricula where there are referrals and links to the other already existing curricula. So if, let's say, you wanted to really did a very holistic, a comprehensive capacity building for your adult education sector, you could say, okay, I would really like to apply all these three curricula, and then I can also see which links and synergies we can find. Of course, the target groups for the three curricula are not identical, but of course, if you also work with institutions, with adult education centers, they would have trainers, they would have managers. So you would be able to apply all those concepts if you really wanted such a holistic approach. I mean, one general remark I would like to make is we have these curricula and they are helpful in a lot of contexts, but not in all contexts. We never say, we as DVV International, we have the curriculum globale, we have the curriculum managerale, we have the curriculum institutionale, so let's go to country XYZ and use them, because maybe there's no need. So we always look at the situation on the ground. And if we say, yes, okay, we need capacity building for adult educators, or we need capacity building for the managers of adult education centers, then that's when we bring our curricula in. And of course, do not simply do it the same way from in one country and another, but there always has to be an adaptation to the local context, which I will speak a bit more about in the next couple of minutes after I've actually introduced the content of the curriculum. Practicality is another important aspect. It needs to be able to be implemented in different teaching contexts, and it should really transfer its competency-based concepts towards the practical implementation in training cycles. And of course, effectiveness above all. If through the curriculum you cannot manage to get to the desired outcomes, then there's something wrong, or then maybe it's not what one should use at the end of the day. So let us look at the structure. There are actually 3 parts to the curriculum. 1, 2, and 3, and the second part really is the most crucial, or let me say the heart of the curriculum. But nonetheless, of course, it's important to give some kind of context to the curriculum, and this is done by the first part, where we talk a bit about the rationale, the development, about who the curriculum is actually for. So basically all that I've explained now, of course, is important as well. The main target group of the curriculum would be managers of adult education centers. Of course, if you look at the structure of adult education centers worldwide, you find huge differences. Sometimes when we do study trips to Germany with groups from Africa, from Southeast Asia, or wherever, we bring them to our German adult education centers, the so-called Volkshochschulen. And we have some Volkshochschulen in rural areas, which are very modest in size, but we have others, for example, in the city where the DVV international headquarters are, the Volkshochschule Bonn, which is a very modern building, which has a budget which is sometimes almost equivalent to the budget of entire departments in national education ministries in some other countries where we are working. So, of course, this is different to compare. It's always about also selecting what you really need, also selecting from the curriculum. Of course, there is a difference between a community learning center in rural Malawi and the Volkshochschule in Bonn in Germany. Nonetheless, we believe that it can be useful for structures of different sizes and in different contexts. So this first part also speaks about the development process. As I said, it also gives a basic definition and understanding about important contexts in this regard. Of course, most importantly about adult learning and education, but also about lifelong learning and about the relationship between adult learning and education and lifelong learning. Then you get also the context a bit further. What role does adult education play? What role does lifelong learning play in the 2030 education agenda, also with regard to the Agenda 2030 as such and the Sustainable Development Goals. And then it's about how to apply the curriculum. That's the last part of this first part. And then we get to the core of the curriculum, which is the second part, the 6 modules that I talked about, the 6 modules that had been predefined, that were then in close consultation with ourselves, filled with content by our external experts, and which then always have the same structure which you find here. And if you like, after the presentation, I can also briefly walk you through the curriculum so that you see what this actually means in practice. So we have 6 modules. for every module, we have firstly defined the competencies that should be achieved on the level of the participants after the respective module. This will be done by addressing certain topics, which we have called main topics. There is a definition of learning outcomes. There is a note on implementation to say, well, okay, this is how you should actually go about this. We then, I spoke about that earlier on, always have a part about linkages to other modules, but also linkages to the other curricula. And then finally, a recommendation scope. So of course, it might vary from one country to the other, even maybe from one institution to the other, but we have a general recommendation about how many hours or how many days should be spent on one module. In general, for the curriculum globale, I can say we suggest about 4 to 5 days for one module. It can also be more. Depends, of course, also on the size of the target group. In Southeast Asia, usually we took a bit longer, but that's also because we had a lot of participants. I said 30 to 35 participants. And then the general idea is that one module does not only consist of a phase in presence, a 5-day workshop, that's essential, but there should also be some kind of homework, which is then further accompanied by the trainers of the respective modules. So the idea is that whatever participants learned in that module, they can actually try to apply when they go back to their respective jobs. Let's say I am an officer in the non-formal education department in the Ministry of Education in Laos. Then I've done a first module about, for example, let's say monitoring and evaluation, and then I want to monitor what's been happening under my responsibility. And then, of course, I ideally should be able to somehow apply the skills that I learned. I might not be able to apply all of them straight away, but there was always the possibility to get into touch with the facilitators of the respective module. And we also did some monitoring trips to visit the participants. Not all of them, that would have been a bit too much, but for every module we tried to ensure that we could at least in Southeast Asia visit some of the participants to see how they were doing, whether they were facing difficulties. I mean, there could be all kinds of difficulties. For example, that yes, the participant was very willing to implement whatever he learned, but then there was a boss who said, no, we've always done this a certain way. Just because you've participated in that workshop, we are not going to change things. I mean, this can happen. And then, of course, it's about dialogue. It's about seeing with the higher authorities how we can find a compromise. Ideally, of course, the whole thing is prepared in such a way that all the bosses, all the directors, all the people you need to approve, they have already been included in the very preparatory phase of such a training cycle, so that you don't face these hiccups as we sometimes face them initially in Laos as well as Cambodia. So here you can see the very structure of each module. And now, of course, it will be very interesting for you to know, I guess, what do the actual modules look like. And I've prepared a slide for every module where I just defined the competencies and some of the main topics. And when we scroll through the curriculum later on, you will also see the other areas that I mentioned that are also relevant. So the first module is a bit similar to the first module that you also find in the curriculum globale. It's basic knowledge on adult education and lifelong learning. We thought, okay, these people that we are training, they are not adult educators, but still, as they are managers, as they have to organize adult educators, we cannot accept that they have no knowledge about ALE, about lifelong learning. So this is something very basic we have to start with. So to say that the basic competence should be that individuals who have completed this module will have a deep understanding of ALE as a part of lifelong learning and are able to transform this into the design of a variety of programs and activities of ALE based on of the institutions of ALE based on flexible learning approaches and legal documents that support ALE and lifelong learning. And here you already see we talk about legal documents. Maybe there are some documents that are important globally, but if we speak about the local law context, of course, this is different from country to country. So this is already an example where you can see, of course, we need to break down this curriculum to the local context. This is a universal curriculum, but ideally it is complemented by further material that really takes into account what's happening on the ground. For example, in Malawi, we have a policy on adult education and literacy, a strategy for adult education and literacy. Those are important foundational documents that someone needs to know about when he is the manager of an institution for adult learning and education in Malawi. In Laos, we had the decree on lifelong learning, very important document. So this is why, ideally, when you think of introducing this in your country, you also think about what additional material you actually need, and ideally you do this in cooperation with the trainers you envisage to use in your respective training cycles to say that, okay, we have these 6 modules. What do they actually mean for the local context? What is important in that particular country, in that particular region? So the main topics, just as an example, there's basic knowledge of lifelong learning and adult education, lifelong learning and adult learning and education in the national legal framework, constitutions, education laws and regulations, and then knowledge about institutions of adult learning and education centers in the non-formal, in the education, adult education system, whatever they are called. So that is the first module. Of course, the level of depth as far as adult learning and education and lifelong learning is concerned is not as great as in the curriculum globale, because we need other skills. Yeah? If you want to go deeper and work as an adult educator, then you would go for the curriculum globale. But here, at least, we need basic knowledge. By basic knowledge, I mean at least 5 days with maybe some kind of homework afterwards in that particular field. The second module, very important, is on needs assessment and strategic planning. Of course, you can organize trainings, you can organize classes in your center, but these centers should not just organize classes because it's their function, because that's what they always do. But they should identify a need. They should know why certain classes, why certain trainings are offered, and this should be based on a proper needs assessment. To know how this is done, how you approach people, how you collect data. We are not going to, through 5 days, we are not going to make the target group full scientists in this regard, but they should be able to have some basic knowledge and to be able to apply some strategies that will help them to assess needs, and based on those needs actually do some strategic planning. So participants should be able to conduct, coordinate, supervise learners' needs assessments in the communities they work with, and they should be able to do so in a systematic manner which can be reproduced, making results from different assessments comparable. They should be able to define the strategy and vision for the center and create and implement strategic plans for periodic goals and long-term goals towards the center vision. So it's very much also about the center or the contribution. And here, of course, we find strong linkages also to the curriculum institutionale. So we have 2 main topics, the needs assessment and the strategic planning, both with regard to theoretical knowledge, but with some homework as well through actually practical application. The third module is about internal management and leadership skills and competencies. So I know this depends a lot on the size of the center. In some centers, you might even be fighting on your own a bit. Ideally, we have centers that are based in the community where other people are involved, maybe where there is even some other staff. We don't really have this in Malawi, but we have, for example, the committees of the community learning centers, and even them, they need to somehow organize themselves. So there needs to be this capacity to also somehow manage your own staff. You need to have some leadership skills for this. You need to know how to delegate. So in all, the participants should know the legal framework, if there is any relevant to their institutions. They should be able to manage their centers effectively, ideally create inspiring working and learning environments, so good practices in human resources, inventory, planning and reporting, thus simply becoming more competent leaders. Essential topics that are being taught in that module would then be the concept of management and leadership, human resources management, communication, and planning. The fourth module is on networking and cooperation. And this is something that always stands out, I have to say, when we do study visits to our German adult education centers, the Volkshochschulen, because they are very much embedded in local structures. Many of you might know there are around 900 Volkshochschulen in Germany. So that means basically every town from a certain level, a certain population actually has an adult education center. And that adult education center has strong connections to the political fields. They are somewhat connected to the political parties. They have connections to the private sector. They have connections to civil society. And that is all important to be able to get trainers, to be able to get a good understanding in society about what the center actually has to offer, and for creating synergies, for actually establishing the center as an important place in the community. And so this is why networking and cooperation are highly important skills to actually establish yourself as something that people talk about, as something that people look at as relevant. So the competencies that are being taught would be that the participants are able to establish and sustain networks with a diversity of stakeholders for their centers, operation and development, that they are able to cooperate and manage collaboration efficiently, and that they are able to communicate plans of programs and activities to partners as well as to donors using marketing skills and others. Of course, I mean, we are all working in difficult environments. Financial resources are always scarce. So if there's any chance of somehow increasing them, marketing skills, communication skills would be important. So we talk about different topics: cooperation, networking, the raising of financial funds, negotiating for desired results, the creation of partnership mapping. No center runs without finances, obviously. So the fifth module is about financial management. In a lot of contexts, in a lot of countries, we get people who are experts of adult education. And sometimes, of course, this is true to all the organizations, sometimes even ourselves. We all think we are experts in adult education, but there's more to what we do in our project work, in our offices, and the same applies to the adult education centers. It's also about finances. So we have to have good skills about financial management. We should be able to develop and implement effective and efficient budgets, budget plans for various types of activities and projects. We should see where there may be profits. Maybe we can even have income generating activities. Where could we incur losses? How do we manage funds in line with the government policies? If we're a government center, if we are financed from outside, maybe how we're in line with donor policies. So that always needs to be clear. And once again, it's a typical example for the relevance of the local, the national context that needs to be taken into account when we look at these competencies. So there needs to be a basic understanding of finances, methods of budgeting need to be clear, a financial management system and reporting practices should be known and understood and applied. Financial requirements of donor-funded projects, as I said, maybe there are internal financial guidelines of a certain center that need to be taken into account, or maybe that need to be introduced. And knowledge of finance management should be always included in decision making, and this is a particular skill that needs to be taught in this module as well. The final module is then about monitoring and evaluation, and here we find similarities with the Curriculum Globale again, which basically also ends with monitoring and evaluation, because if you do a training as an adult educator, you also want to monitor, you also want to evaluate your participants. You might want to see after some time also how your participants actually are performing. And of course, as a manager of a center of adult education, you also want to know, well, what is actually the impact of my classes, of my trainings? Do they have an impact at all? And if not, or only a small one, then what can I change? What can I maybe change on the way already? If I see that maybe the effect of classes, the quality of classes is not as high as I would wish it would be. So participants after this module, they should be able to develop and implement effective monitoring and evaluation plans for projects and operations of the institutions of adult learning and education, and they should be able to inform stakeholders in comprehensible ways of the areas of success, as well as of issues that need addressing for the systematic and sustainable development of their centers. So we talk about the concept of monitoring and evaluation. We talk about entire systems. We talk about the different elements. We talk about data collection, data handling in general, and the use of data for decision making. Now, these are the 6 modules. That is the content of the curriculum MangerALE, or the core part, because as you might remember, I also talked about a third part. So the third part is actually giving an overview of the job of a manager of an institution for adult learning and education. It is quite a helpful instrument, I would say, for someone who is running a center, because it has a kind of a function description, which you could also use or call a job description. It has an outline of the various functions of a manager, and then functions replaced by key areas of responsibilities. Now, this sounds a bit abstract. Now, what does this actually look in practice? Let us start with the function descriptions. And for the function descriptions, we have actually defined 11 result areas. I can give you some examples for result areas. One example would be mission, vision, a policy plan. Another one would be the structure and the organization of the center. Another one would be financial policies. And for every one of that area, we have a short description. We have defined some targets, like what is the manager supposed to do? What's this is what we mean by the target. Then we have behavioral indicators for that and concrete tasks. And this has been done for all the 11 result areas. And then beyond that, we've also defined 14 competencies. They are more on an abstract, or let me maybe say sometimes a soft skill level, skills that we equally deem important for a good manager of an institution of adult learning and education. So we are not talking about the technical knowledge or the professional knowledge, but it's just something cross-cutting, I could also say. So there we have areas or competencies such as the ability to think forward, or the result orientation, or something like authenticity, something you cannot easily touch and which you cannot simply address also through one module, but which can be somehow kept in mind as you go along as a trainer and also as you go along in your daily work as the manager of an adult education center. So there we always have the core idea and then the behavioral indicators. Now, what's the use of this last part? Can be used by the manager of an adult education center. And of course, here we talk firstly about already a relatively sophisticated structure, which I know we do not necessarily find in a lot of places in the countries where, for example, DVV International is working on this continent. It can be used for hiring people, not necessarily on a permanent basis, but even just for some trainings or for some certain activities, to select people, also to monitor the performance of colleagues, of your staff, to actually have some kind of performance review, and then to also do some kind of an assessment. Finally, of course, as a manager of such a center that we are talking about, ideally, you also want to further develop your staff. You want to provide some capacity building for them. So there is also the professional development, which can benefit through this last part, through this function description. It can be used for the general engagement of your staff, your personal engagement, but then also for the personal development of the colleagues. So this now is the last part of the curriculum, and the curriculum ends with a sentence which I actually find quite nice, because it very much brings to the point what the job of a manager of a center for adult education is about. It's actually a quote from a professor from Harvard University. I think it's Harvard, might also be Stanford, but I think it's Harvard. And he actually said, management is the opportunity to help people become better people. Practiced that way, it's a magnificent profession. So with this quote, I would like to end my presentation, but I might not completely stop here, but I might just very briefly walk you through the actual curriculum so that you get an even better idea of what the curriculum is about. Some of you might have already had a look at the curriculum on our website where it's freely available, but I'm just going to share this also with you now, so that I can just walk you through for a minute or two. So can you all see the curriculum again?
Yes.
Good. And there's no protest. So here we are. You basically find the contents as I introduced them to you already. I'm going to scroll directly to part 2 now. Remember, part 2 contains the 6 modules, and the first module is on basic knowledge on adult learning, education, and lifelong learning. So I had already introduced the competency, which you see here. Then it continues with the learning outcomes. Then we have the linkage to other modules and curricula. So here you can, for example, see that there is a strong linkage to the first module of the Curriculum Globale, also linkages to other Curriculum Globale and even Institutionale modules, but also linkages to other modules in this very curriculum. Here you see the main topics. So this is where also a lot of work starts if you want to break down the curriculum to the local context to see, well, what is really important in my context. For example, I talked about the policies. There, of course, the national level is quite important. So there's quite a long list in this. There's this definition of skills and attitudes. There's the note on implementation, how teachers of the curriculum should actually go about to convey the skills. And then, as I said earlier on, there is the recommended scope. For this very module, the recommendation is 36 instruction hours, so that basically comes down to 4.5 days of instruction. But then there should also be individual study and assessment. And then the trainers can also think about some creative ways of doing some kind of assessment, some little presentations, some quizzes, whatever they feel adequate. So this is just to show you what the concrete structure of one module is. But I'm going to end here. And of course, I would be very interested to know from you colleagues whether this is of any relevance for your context. I know that we have a lot of basic challenges on this continent. If, for example, I look at the challenges we have in many rural and remote areas, in many of our African countries, for example, where GVV International is working on. But nonetheless, I could imagine, but would like to hear from you whether that's really the case, that you could take some interesting elements out of it. But at the same time, of course, I would be absolutely open to any question that might be on your mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johan, for a very thought-provoking, very interesting presentation. I see one just very, very short question already. A couple of people asked what if there is a French version. What language is it currently available in?
Yeah, I don't want to lie. I am 90% sure that we have both a French as well as a Spanish version. No, we don't have a French version, unfortunately, as yet, but we do have an Arabic version. So that's the good news for our North African colleagues, at least. Unfortunately, there is no French version as yet, but I could imagine that now with the tools widely available, that the translation of the curriculum into other languages actually is easier than it was 5 years ago when we also translated it into Lao, for example.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the French version, the translation will come soon, but at the moment we don't have a version. We have Spanish. I think on the website in the ALE toolbox it says Spanish, Arabic, and English are the ones at the moment. So unfortunately, French is not there, but it might come in the future soon. Thank you very much, Johan, for a brilliant presentation. I see some lots of comments and people in the chat and people talking about as a Salome Terra. I don't know. I'd like to open the floor to everybody, so please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. But Salome, you had some comments you made as you were listening. Maybe you have a question for Johan.
I can see Matteo is raising his hand.
Well, let's go to Matteo. We'll go back to Salome. Please, Matteo.
Thank you, David, and Johan, for a very nice presentation. So you say that this training was created for the manager of adult education centers, but now trying to reflect on our context, maybe it might now. I'm asking for like your thought on this. Maybe in our region, it can also be extended to those, the leaders in education, in adult education. Like we have at the district level, or the region level, or at the ministry level. Will this module reflect what they're doing and also be capacitated on that? And the other, now the question is, do we have any country in Africa where they have started training on this module? And if they have the trainer who can be able to assist in the other region? Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo. You want to take a couple of questions, Johan, or would you before you answer? Or
yeah, we can take a couple of questions and then I can answer all of them together.
Okay, okay. Salome, I see you have your hand up. Please, the floor is yours. But you, I see your microphone is muted. Yeah. Is Salome with us? We don't hear you. Okay, I'll come back to that one. Carol, I see you also have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Johan, for the presentation. I would like to understand something. During the presentation, I heard that we need 45 days for each modules. I don't know if I understood well, or can you please clarify the length of the training on the whole curriculum manage? I have difficulties to pronounce it.
MangerALE.
Curriculum MangerALE. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I see also in the, Carol, you add a comment in the chat, Johan, that Carol is asking for what would be the links between
Yes,
Curriculum Globale and
and Curriculum Globale. Here in West Africa, we are discovering Curriculum Globale, but now there is a new one. So what are the link between both? But I can already see that Curriculum Globale is more focused on how adult educators can help their learners, the strategy that you have to put in place to make the learning environment very, I don't know how to say, very inclusive, and how to do your best in order to help learners to understand and have new knowledge. But I don't know, the curriculum MangerALE is only for the manager. As a manager, it's help you to develop yourself, or I don't know if I have the right comprehension. So please, if you can clarify, it will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Johan, do you want to answer, or we keep going with questions? Or?
Yeah. Maybe I go for the questions asked by Matteo and by Carol, because there were quite a few already. Let me start with Matteo. You had two questions. The one was on the target group, whether it could include also leaders, people from ministries. I would say yes. I mean, it always depends on the actual job they have to do, but I do see a relevance with regard to most of the modules for those people as well. I mean, it always needs to be seen in how far that could be brought into the same group of participants. But for example, if I speak from experience in Laos and in Cambodia, we always had ministry people there, and for them it was relevant because they also needed to communicate, to coordinate their community learning centers, for example. And And so there were a lot of skills that helped them a lot as well. So basically, I would say it depends on where you do identify needs. And if you identify needs on that level, I think it can also be very helpful. Then you asked about trainers. I think this is a curriculum where you need to work with different trainers, where you cannot just work with one or two trainers throughout the curriculum. At least it's more challenging. With the Curriculum Globale, I think if you've identified two people who are good adult educators, whom you could call maybe master trainers, then those might be able to do all the modules. With the expertise that is needed with the Curriculum Globale, I think it's a bit more challenging because there are very different aspects. Someone that might be a good trainer in financial management might not necessarily be a good trainer in monitoring and evaluation. So I think this is where something one should keep in mind from the very beginning and take into consideration that you need different experts. But in principle, I think this expertise is available. We, of course, have lessons learned from other places where we already applied the curriculum MangerALE as well, for example, also in Eastern Europe. But generally, this is all expertise that can be found on the continent, I would say, and in most individual countries as well. Then let me move to you, Carol. It's not 45 days, actually. I said 4 to 5 days, but I understand that sometimes with the connection that might even be a bit difficult. So the duration of each module is usually, or the recommendation is 4 to 5 days. And if you do it in your country, you might get to the conclusion we need 2 weeks for one module. As I said, we sometimes did that in the Southeast Asian case. So you could do that as well. But general recommendation is 4 to 5 days. So if you assume 5 days, then 6 modules would give you 30 days, obviously. Synergies, links with the Curriculum Globale, they are there. I mean, you saw that some of the modules, like especially the first one and the last one, the basic knowledge on adult learning and education, but also the module on monitoring and evaluation, they are kind of similar. But then we talk about different target groups. So let's assume you have a big adult education center. You will have adult educators there, and you will have your managers there. So the adult educators, they should attend a training based on the Curriculum Globale, whereas the managers should attend a training based on the Curriculum MangerALE. As you saw between the different modules, there are links as well. And of course, ideally, if you want comprehensive capacity building for your center or even for your adult education landscape, you could very well apply both curricula.
Yeah, thank you, Johan. Before we go to the next questions, I see that Salome says she has some technical difficulties, but she wrote some questions for you in the chat. So the first one, the first question she asked, is it possible to get this curriculum to us in Kenya?
I mean, first of all, the curriculum is accessible to anyone. You can just download it from our webpage. Unfortunately, Kenya is not part of the countries where DVV International is currently working. And in this current context of development cooperation, unfortunately, we can make no promise at all that in the near future we will work in Kenya. But at the same time, what I can personally promise is that if you are interested in the curriculum, we can always have a chat, we can always have a video call, and you can always get my advice on how you could possibly use the curriculum and implement it. Second question, have you developed any support materials for this, and could we come up with a way to work together and have this done? I think that in Eastern Europe, they are the furthest, maybe also in some Latin American countries. I'm not fully qualified at this stage to give you an answer about what those particular regions actually did, but I would be very happy to find out from you. So I can take this as some kind of a homework. Development together, yeah, I mean, that then also concerns again the question of, are we working in a certain country or not? And I'm not sure if there was any potential, maybe even in the framework of the continental project, to also work together with the academic groups. That would be a question maybe for David, which I found very interesting, and where I would be very happy to contribute as well.
Yeah, very, very much. In Moja, we can't be based, as Johan said, in every country, unfortunately. But we try to use digital means or any means to keep the communicating together, and I think this can be something that could be explored. I think my colleague Umaima wanted to make a point before we go on to the next question.
Thank you, David. Alors, je voudrais juste dire aux participants francophones que c'est possible de poser des questions en français, aussi de partager avec nous leurs commentaires, soit sur le chat ou en levant la main, et on va leur donner la parole. Et vous pouvez bien sûr parler en français sans problème. On va essayer d'intervenir à chaque fois et de faciliter les échanges entre vous et l'intervenant. Voilà, c'est tout. Merci.
Thank you, Umaima. It's an important point. You know, for this webinar and for Moja in general, we do everything in English and French. Well, I'm speaking English now, but some French speakers, some English speakers are on the team, and please feel free. You know, French. We had this conversation many times. French is not for us just English translated. He said something in English, so I must translate also to French. But French is also its own language, of course, as you know. So we want to encourage you, please, if you feel more comfortable in French or it's your native tongue, please use it. Okay. I see Mamadou has been very patient. Mamadou, would you like to ask a question?
Été vraiment très, très patient. Donc, je remercie Johan pour son brillant exposé. Alors, moi, je m'en vais pas poser une question, si on peut le dire comme ça, tout juste une observation concernant des DEV international. Alors, moi, j'ai eu la chance de participer un tout petit peu au programme de renforcement des capacités des formateurs adultes, des programmes qui sont mis en œuvre par DEV international, tels que le système Building Approach, le curriculum institutionnel, LAMP, et ici avec et Carole qui vient de parler là sur le curriculum global et avec DEV international Côte d'Ivoire. Bon. Et je constate qu'avec les modules, surtout les curriculums, curriculum institutionnel et curriculum global, et même curriculum managérial, et qui concerne surtout les formateurs intellectuels, il y aura trop de va-et-vient, trop de va-et-vient. Et vous faites des séances de modules de 4 jours, vous partez, vous revenez, que ce soit avec le curriculum institutionnel et avec le curriculum global et même le curriculum managérial, il y a des va-et-vient, de trop nombreux va-et-vient, si bien que ce n'est pas évident que la même personne puisse suivre au complet non seulement un seul module, un seul programme, mais également les trois. Alors, pour moi, est-ce que l'idéal n'est pas pour développer international de rapprocher les États afin que les compétences qui sont développées dans les curricula, que nous puissions les enseigner dans l'université et pour que nous puissions avoir des cadres et très bien formés. Au Mali, je parle sous le couvert de Tabouret qui est là. Le Mali a essayé de mettre en place une licence en éducation non formelle. Bon, il paraît que ce n'a pas encore démarré, mais c'est une initiative qui est à saluer. Alors, je reviens, est-ce que DEV ne veut pas en faire en sorte que nous puissions avoir dans les universités des programmes qui traitent tous ces aspects-là, tous les curriculums qui sont très, très bien élaborés, qui ont été validés, qui ont fait leurs preuves, est-ce qu'on ne peut pas les retenir et les mettre entre les mains de l'État comme un programme d'enseignement dans les universités. Merci.
Should I respond in French, or is it easier for the interpreters if I continue in English?
I think it's the same. If you want to just, listeners can choose if they
Okay.
English or
Ouais.
Chinese.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Guerra, pour votre observation. J'importe que ce soit très important. Enfin, notre but final, c'est ou serait l'institutionnalisation des curricula. C'est bon si nous pouvons exécuter les curricula dans les différents pays, mais si nous avons des partenaires du monde académique, du monde universitaire, ça c'est toujours une très bonne chose parce qu'il y aura un jour où DVV ne sera pas là. Comme bientôt au Mali, mais dans d'autres pays aussi. Et si nous avons la chance de travailler avec différentes universités pour qu'ils intègrent le contenu des différents curricula ou de développer peut-être d'autres curricula qui sont basés sur le curriculum global et le curriculum managéral. Ça serait très, très bon aussi. Alors, c'est toujours bon d'être en étroit dialogue par rapport à ça, mais bien sûr, moi, je suis responsable pour l'Afrique australe et bon, nous avons certaines priorités en Afrique de l'Ouest et ça, c'est aussi une responsabilité de mes collègues là-bas et il faut toujours voir si certains éléments pourront bien faire partie d'une certaine stratégie que nous avons dans le pays ou pas. Pendant que je réponds en France, peut-être je peux prendre une autre question en français de M. Kojovi Akakpo, hein, qui avait demandé s'il peut accéder au programme de formation de curriculum managéral au Togo. Franchement, ce serait une question pour mes collègues en Afrique de l'Ouest. Jusqu'ici, je ne pense pas que nous avons commencé à exécuter le curriculum managéral au Togo parce que c'était mon ancienne responsabilité aussi. Mais je ne connais pas votre background, mais peut-être c'est la possibilité nous avons la possibilité de dialoguer avec notre bureau à Lomé aussi par rapport à ça.
Alors, Johan, il y a une autre question en français. Si on peut
Oui,
donner la parole à ma collègue Nawel Chibeni, je sais qu'elle va parler en français. Donc, Nawel, à toi la parole.
Merci, Omaima. Vous m'entendez?
Oui,
oui,
très
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 bien.
bien.
Ok. Merci beaucoup, Johan, pour la présentation si détaillée et pertinente. Franchement, ce référentiel modulaire de compétences qui présente une approche franchement adaptable à divers contextes et qui lie la théorie andragogique et pratique et la pratique administrative. Donc, c'est très pertinent comme curriculum. J'ai deux questions en fait. C'est que comment ce curriculum, il prend-il en compte les réalités de gestion, souvent informelles? Ici, je parle de notre cas en Tunisie, la gestion pour les centres d'éducation d'adultes, elles sont quasiment informelles. Donc, comment peut-il prendre en compte cette réalité, à votre avis? Donc, la deuxième, c'est y a-t-il une stratégie prévue pour favoriser l'appropriation nationale de ces curriculums par les ministères d'éducation? Est-ce que vous avez pensé à une stratégie ou bien une feuille de route pour approprier ce curriculum au sein des ministères de l'Éducation. Et merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup pour ces deux questions très pertinentes. La première, la réalité. Donc, je pense que en Tunisie, vous partagez une réalité du contexte dans lequel vous opérez avec vos centres, avec beaucoup de pays sur le continent. Euh, si vous regardez le curriculum, vous pourriez peut-être imaginer que nous parlons seulement des centres qui ont beaucoup d'employés, qui opèrent avec beaucoup d'argent, qui offrent beaucoup de différentes classes, mais nous sommes bien conscients du fait que la réalité est différente, comme vous avez déjà expliqué. Et bon, dans notre région, en Afrique australe, et la même chose. Donc, nous travaillons dans un contexte très informel avec des community learning centers où nous n'avons pas beaucoup de personnes dans un centre. Quelquefois, nous n'avons personne qui travaille permanentement, qui gagnent d'argent. On travaille beaucoup avec des volontaires ou avec des professeurs qui ont un salaire très, très bas. Mais en même temps, je pense que toutes ces institutions informelles euh, puissent aussi profiter de ce curriculum. Pourquoi? Parce que à la fin, c'est toujours l'adaptation au contexte local. Et à notre avis, le curriculum couvre beaucoup des aspects très pertinents pour la gestion de chaque centre. Et ce qu'il faut faire est juste, par exemple, à travers le développement de manuels, adapter toutes les compétences définies, tout le contenu qui est défini dans le curriculum au contexte national. Peut-être vous prenez la décision que certains aspects ne sont pas importants dans votre pays. C'est possible. Ce n'est pas obligatoire de couvrir chaque compétence que nous avons mentionnée dans le curriculum. Mais cet exercice, travailler avec le curriculum comme base et en même temps développer autres matériaux pour l'exécution sur le terrain, pourrait être une bonne stratégie pour bien profiter du curriculum. Et alors, j'ai oublié la deuxième question. Pardon.
Thank you.
Ok, so, je me rappelle de la deuxième question.
Oui.
Je viens de noter juste un moment. Donc, elle a dit, est-ce qu'il y a une stratégie pour favoriser l'appropriation nationale de ces curriculums par le ministère de l'Éducation?
Ah, oui, ça concerne encore une fois ce que j'avais déjà mentionné quand j'avais répondu aux commentaires de Monsieur Diarra. C'est l'institutionnalisation. C'est l'objectif final. Je dirais, c'est une discussion que nous avons déjà menée au niveau de siège aussi pour avoir une durabilité finale. Donc, je ne dirais pas nous avons déjà une vraie stratégie, mais c'est quelque chose que nous avons déjà dans la tête. Et si nous avons des partenaires qui sont prêts à nous accompagner ou des partenaires académiques qui sont prêts à adopter le curriculum global, manageral, institutionnel comme curriculum de leur propre université, ça serait très bienvenu.
Eh bien, merci beaucoup. Donc, nous avons aussi une question en français dans le chat et on donnera aussi la parole à Madame Fatoumata. Donc, si vous pouvez recevoir 2 questions à la fois, ça serait très bien. Donc, je vais lire la question de Monsieur David Kamwanga. Alors, il dit, la formation des adultes et le développement des programmes d'études sont-ils essentiels à la promotion de l'éducation en milieu rural, notamment en Afrique australe? Et plus particulièrement au Malawi, ces cadres de référence sont-ils applicables dans les zones reculées? Les responsables des programmes d'études supervisent-ils les résultats d'apprentissage principalement en milieu rural? Et il dit aussi qu'il pense qu'il s'agit en fait de plusieurs questions, mais il apprécie beaucoup votre réponse.
Oui, en fait, je pense que c'est une question en anglais, n'est-ce pas?
Ah, j'ai seulement vu celle en français.
Parce que moi, je le vois en anglais.
Ah,
And I
d'accord. Oui,
actually
oui,
think,
c'est mon collègue Abdoulaye qui a traduit en français, exactement.
okay, yeah. So I might respond in English to you, Mr. Kamwanga. Yeah, very relevant question. Obviously, I mean, we always have to be pragmatic, and I mean, in an ideal world, we would have the resources, we would have the context where we can always train a lot of people in all the different curricula we have, because we see the relevance. But of course, we also see great needs that we cannot satisfy with the resources we have and with the time we have. So sometimes we have to be pragmatic in a way that, for example, in Malawi, I can give you a current example. We had not really got into the process of implementing the curriculum globale so far. We have one axis, which is an academic axis, where we promote a diploma course in adult education, which I think is very important because we need education on that level. But then we also said we have so many adult educators in the country. We have about 10,000 literacy instructors in Malawi. Most of them have never really received any proper training. So, of course, they would also be a good target group for the curriculum globale, but even the curriculum globale is a curriculum which has 6 modules, each of them lasting 1 to 2 weeks. So with the given resources, maybe that's even too much, and that takes too much time. So we are now in the process of trying to develop something of a shorter duration, where we can still integrate the most relevant context and where we still, to a certain extent, can accompany our participants. So basically, this answer is also very much valid for the curriculum managerale. Yeah, if you see you only have very limited resources, you have a big target group, have a look at the curriculum, sit together with some experts and see what you can actually take out of it that is the most relevant for your local context.
Thank you, Johan. We're going to close, and before we close as well, my colleague Umayma will introduce a little about the Moja platform. But I see that Madame Fatoumata has had her hand up for a long time. Maybe, Johan, this is another chance for French. Please, Madame Fatoumata, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup. Vous me recevez? Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Ce n'est pas une question, c'est juste une proposition. Je vous propose à ceux que vous savez, DVV a quitté en Guinée depuis 2019 et c'était le seul bailleur qui accompagnait les organisations de la société civile en même temps l'État. Et aujourd'hui, il y a eu beaucoup d'acquis que DVV a laissé dans le pays. Mais on n'a pas de financement. Et nous-mêmes, on a fait tellement de plaidoyer pour que l'État puisse intégrer l'alphabétisation dans les curricula au niveau des institutions d'enseignement, surtout à l'université. Mais jusqu'à présent, il y a blocus. Moi, je voudrais proposer que DVV, comme vous n'êtes pas dans tous les pays, Mais il y a des ambassades d'Allemagne qui sont dans les pays et qui accompagnent aussi l'État. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas une possibilité aussi de proposer à vos ambassades pour qu'ils puissent vraiment accompagner l'État pour créer des facultés d'apprentissage tout au long de la vie dans les universités? Parce qu'actuellement, quand je prends cette couche d'apprentissage, c'est seulement la société civile qui a des expertises. Et bizarrement, ils vont dans les autres institutions et que les institutions les utilisent pour le développement communautaire, quoi. C'était ça une proposition de réfléchir cette stratégie, comment DVV, en partenariat avec les ambassades d'Allemagne qui sont dans les pays, peuvent accompagner nos États, parce qu'il y a, quand on prend le taux d'analphabétisme est très élevé, mais jusqu'à présent, il y a pas dans les communautés, dans les universités, on n'a pas. C'est seulement à l'ISFAD, et ça aussi, c'est une matière en 3e année licence. Vous avez le premier module. C'était ça ma proposition. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Dabo, pour cette proposition. C'est très bien apprécié et en même temps, on est très content de savoir qu'il y a déjà des acquis de notre travail en Guinée. La Guinée était toujours un pays très important pour nous. Euh, euh, même si maintenant on ne travaille plus en Guinée. Euh, Malheureusement, les structures de la coopération allemande sont très compliquées, je dirais, et il n'est pas si facile seulement parce que nous sommes une organisation allemande et nous avons notre ambassade allemande à Conakry aussi, que nous pouvons motiver l'ambassade à agir dans notre direction, je dirais. Mais bien sûr, euh, dans notre travail régional, dans notre travail continental, vous êtes très bienvenus et nous allons essayer aussi de faire en sorte que nous pouvons vous aider. Il y a la coopération avec Pamoja aussi dans la région Afrique de l'Ouest. Par exemple, nous avons le projet Moja. Et si il y a un certain type de consultance qui est requis, je suis presque sûr qu'on pourrait faire quelque chose, mais en général, le truc un peu triste est que on ne peut pas facilement changer les différents chemins par rapport à la choix des pays et même par rapport aux actions des autres acteurs allemands.
Ok, merci.
Alors, nous avons Monsieur Hariti qui a la main levée. Est-ce que c'est possible de prendre une dernière question, Johan?
Oui, bien sûr.
Ok, très bien. On vous passe la parole, Monsieur Hariti.
Bonjour tout le monde. Voilà ma question un peu sur le curriculum. Bon, peut-être c'est une question à double voie. Quand on voit le curriculum managérial, c'est toujours on prend en considération les caractéristiques sociales et culturelles, etc. Donc, d'emblée, c'est une approche aux doctrines des pays, comment dirais-je, où la laïcité est omniprésente ou qui gère. Donc, il n'y a pas d'ingérence du politique ou de la religion. Mais quand on dit qu'elle est adaptable à tout contexte culturel, social, parfois en Afrique, il y a le contexte religieux qui est omniprésent. Est-ce qu'un curriculum managérial a pris en considération ce volet? D'accord. Le deuxième volet de la question qui se rattache, et il y a parfois deux voies de nomination des responsables d'université, la voie d'élection et la voie de nomination. Est-ce que ce genre de curriculum a pris en charge cette problématique? Et merci.
Donc, en ce qui concerne le contexte politique et aussi religieux, euh, je pense que c'est dedans. C'est dedans parce que dans les différents modules, vous avez certains aspects que vous devez adapter au contexte local. Et au contexte local, nous avons un contexte social, un contexte politique, nous avons la religion qui est sans doute, et je suis complètement d'accord avec vous, c'est très important. Donc, ça, ce sont les choses qu'on ne peut pas concrètement impliquer dans un curriculum universel comme le curriculum managéral, euh, mais qu'ils sont quand même très importants. Je suis complètement d'accord pour une contextualisation. La deuxième question, pourriez-vous répéter encore une fois?
Oui, elle se rattache à la première, c'est que on a la problématique de la nomination du manager, la voie
Mhm.
d'élection et la voie de nomination. Donc, elle impose une politique un peu différente des curricula, des contenus des formations. Voilà. La nomination du responsable. Dans la majorité des cas des pays africains, c'est la nomination. D'accord? Donc, c'est la voie hiérarchique, le politique et inter. C'est pas l'élection des responsables. Est-ce que ça pose problématique ou il y a une certaine adaptabilité du curriculum proposé?
Non, absolument. Il y a cette adaptabilité. Euh, donc, bien sûr, le curriculum assume plus ou moins un monde idéal, hein. Nous savons que nous ne travaillons pas dans ce contexte 100%, mais c'est pour ça que nous devons adapter ce que nous faisons. Par exemple, si je compare euh, Laos avec Cambodge, hein. En Cambodge, nous avons une société civile euh, assez vivante, mais en Laos, une société civile n'existe pas. Donc, toutes les nominations sont toujours faites par l'État ou par les provinces, tandis qu'en Cambodge est complètement différent. Quelquefois, c'est le niveau des provinces, mais quelquefois, nous avons des centres qui sont gérés par les différentes ONG. Et donc, ça, c'est quelque chose qu'il faut prendre en compte, même si on travaille dans des pays qui sont à première vue très, très similaires, hein, parce que dans la réalité, c'est toujours différent. Mais ce que je voulais dire, oui, si on fait des adaptations pour le contexte africain, oui, on peut tous ces aspects intégrer, euh, même dans les différents contextes nationaux.
Merci.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Unfortunately, our time is coming to close. I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Johan Heilmann for the presentation and the interesting discussion that came afterwards. Please, it doesn't stop here, but this webinar is really part of an ongoing thing. It's part of an ongoing conversation. And we know in every country there are so many challenges with ALE, and we have a lot of financial and technical challenges, but there are things like this out there. Curriculum Globale is out there, Curriculum MangerALE, just to name one or two, are out there to help us to professionalize and try and become better at delivering for people with ALE. So thank you, Johan, for sharing this with us today. I'd
It
like
was a
to,
great
yep, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying it was a great pleasure, and thank you for your very interesting and inspiring questions and comments.
Okay, thank you very much. My colleague Umaima is going to quickly present something for you in just a few minutes. So please, Umaima.
Thank you, David. Donc, je vais présenter rapidement Moja pour vous. Alors, pour les personnes anglophones, vous pouvez toujours cliquer sur interprétation, puis choisir l'anglais pour pouvoir suivre la traduction. Est-ce que vous pouvez voir l'écran? Très bien. Alors, pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas, je suis Oumaima Kefi, je suis chargée de communication régionale Afrique du Nord chez DVV International et je suis aussi responsable régionale Afrique du Nord de la communication et de la coordination du projet continental africain. Je vais vous présenter donc la plateforme Moja, qui est une plateforme en ligne pour les professionnels et les praticiens de l'apprentissage et de l'éducation des adultes dans le secteur public, dans le milieu universitaire, dans la société civile et dans le secteur privé aussi, tout ça en Afrique. Donc, c'est un lieu de création de liens, un lieu d'accès à une multitude de contenus au profit du continent et de sa population. Et je vous invite à visiter notre site web. Donc, c'est mojaafrica.net ou bien tout simplement scanner ce QR code. Et bien sûr, je vais partager avec vous cette présentation pour que vous puissiez visiter la plateforme et comprendre et voir les ressources et toutes les fonctionnalités qu'on offre. Donc, la plateforme se présente comme ceci. Vous pouvez y trouver les ressources, aussi les événements, comme l'événement d'aujourd'hui. Donc, on organise toujours des webinaires. Vous pouvez aussi trouver le journal de Moja et vous pouvez aussi contribuer vous-même à ce journal en ajoutant des articles ou des ressources ou bien sûr en participant à nos événements. Donc, si vous voulez vous inscrire, bien sûr, il suffit de voir ici en haut. Voilà. Et l'inscription est très, très facile. Le tableau de bord se présente comme ceci et vous n'avez qu'à cliquer ici à gauche pour soit voir les événements, plutôt organiser un événement si vous voulez, voir les ressources, plutôt ajouter des ressources et ajouter des articles. Donc, on va essayer de parcourir les sections une à une. Donc, vous allez trouver les ressources. Donc, ici, vous pouvez trouver des documents ou des liens utiles de guides, toujours liés à l'éducation des adultes de tous les pays de l'Afrique. Il y a aussi le journal de Moja. Donc, c'est une publication annuelle qui ressemble, plutôt, qui rassemble des articles, des expériences de terrain, des cas d'études, etc. Et on essaye de mettre en valeur les expériences des praticiens de l'éducation des adultes. Et juste pour vous donner une idée, le thème de l'année 2026, c'est la sécurité, la sûreté et la consolidation de la paix, donc le rôle de l'apprentissage et de l'éducation des adultes. Concernant les événements Moja, donc comme vous êtes ici avec nous, nous organisons toujours des webinaires et on souhaite vraiment vous avoir parmi nous à chaque fois. On choisit à chaque fois un thème spécifique et on essaye de répondre à vos besoins. Il y a aussi la page pays, donc c'est un outil de visibilité. Donc la page pays est une fiche de référence par pays qui présente les principales informations de l'éducation des adultes dans chaque pays de l'Afrique. Vous pouvez y trouver les bonnes pratiques, les institutions et acteurs impliqués, donc vous y trouverez aussi des contacts et aussi les politiques et cadres réglementaires existants. Donc, on a suivi une démarche pour pouvoir collecter ces informations. Donc, il y a eu des rencontres avec des praticiens de l'éducation des adultes. Il y a eu des échanges entre nous. Il y a eu aussi un questionnaire. Et bien sûr, ces informations peuvent être mises à jour à tout moment. Donc, on a besoin de vos contributions. N'hésitez pas à me contacter à tout moment pour nous donner des informations ou si vous voulez corriger une information ou ajouter quelque chose, n'hésitez pas. Donc, soit sur info@mojaafrica.net ou tout simplement en m'envoyant un email ou par WhatsApp. Et bien sûr, je vais vous communiquer mon adresse mail et mon numéro WhatsApp. Pour finir, je vais vous parler un tout petit peu du glossaire Moja qui est en cours. Donc, ce que nous préparons, c'est le lancement d'un glossaire des termes clés de l'apprentissage de l'éducation des adultes. afin d'améliorer la compréhension des concepts clés de l'apprentissage et l'éducation des adultes, encourager l'engagement de la communauté et créer une base de connaissances communes et accessible. Donc, si vous voulez aussi participer à cela, n'hésitez pas à nous contacter parce que ça ne peut qu'être bénéfique pour nous et aussi pour vous. Donc, pour finir, je vais vous citer quelques avantages de faire partie de la communauté de Moja. Donc, vous aurez accès à plusieurs informations sur l'éducation des adultes. Vous aurez aussi accès à une liste de contacts, de profils d'organisation. Et vous pouvez aussi participer à nos événements et pourquoi pas organiser un événement tous ensemble. Donc, je vous laisse ici nos contacts. Nous avons un groupe Facebook et on souhaite vous avoir parmi nous. Donc, n'hésitez pas à rejoindre notre groupe. C'est Africa Adult Education Practitioners en anglais ou bien en français, praticiens de l'éducation des adultes. Nous avons aussi un compte LinkedIn, donc c'est Moja sur LinkedIn, c'est Moja-8 aller sur YouTube et bien sûr notre plateforme mojaafricain.net et on vous incite toujours à vous inscrire et faire partie de notre communauté. Donc voilà, juste une dernière chose, si vous rencontrez un problème pour vous connecter à Moja ou n'importe quel autre problème lié à la plateforme, n'hésitez pas à me contacter et soit par email ou par WhatsApp et j'essaierai de vous accompagner afin de résoudre ce problème ou la situation ensemble. Voilà, merci beaucoup pour votre attention.